In 1969, the Rolling Stones released their single, You Can't Always Get What You Want. You probably didn't think that was how I would start today. My guess, showing you that album cover. In rock history terms, the reason why I'm bringing it up is that in rock history terms, it was a transition album. It's the first Rolling Stone album to feature named by a man by the name of Mick Jagger. Have you heard of? Yeah. So they did something there, got something right there. And more importantly, maybe, is just the transition that it makes from the sort of flower power positivity of the early 60s. I'm not a rock historian. We have a rock historian in our congregation, and I have a daughter who knows more about the 60s than people who lived in the 60s, I think. So I'm trying to get this right. But, the Beatles had a little song also you may have heard of called Let It Be. And the Rolling Stones named their album Let It Bleed. It tells you a little bit about the transition that was happening toward a maybe more realistic, less optimistic, gritty way of encountering the world. I remember this song, fast forward, very distinctly as part of a social distance worldwide concert event in 2020. And somebody thought it would be a good idea, maybe you remember this, to sort of give a frame to the pandemic by having Mick Jagger sing these words, "You can't always get what you want." Oh, I remember thinking, yeah, the truth hurts. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometime, you'll find you get what you need. Some of you are going to have that song stuck in your head now. The prayer that Jesus taught us to pray makes that turn as well, to what we want, what we need, and kind of getting in the mix of that. Now, having said that, it's important for us to realize as we've kind of broken out this prayer, this comes third in the segments. The first, as we began our look at the Lord's Prayer, is a reorienting of all of life to God. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. So that God's holiness would be real in my life. That's one. The second part of the prayer reorients life toward God's will. So not what we want, but what God wants. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Imagine how different our world would be if we made those two switches first. Most of us, if we're honest, probably begin prayer jumping right to the third part. Dear God, boom, here we go. This is what I want. This is what I need. It comes often, prayer comes from a place of felt need for us. And I don't think that's bad. But what the Lord's Prayer does, what the model prayer that Jesus gave us does, is puts those wants and needs in a context. It doesn't mean you shouldn't want things or need things. It means that they find their place as we first reorient all of life to God and then ask, what does God want before we get to what we want. Imagine how different our world would be if we prayed those parts of the prayer before we jumped into anything else. And imagine maybe even how different our wants and our needs would be if we started there. It's third. It's not that Jesus doesn't care or God doesn't care about our wants and needs, but they find their place in the bigger thing that God is doing. Someone has said in the Lord's Prayer, it's thy before I. And that switch is an important one. It's an essential one. And as we say that, and as we come to the I part of our prayer, there's some. It's almost too simple, the words that Jesus asked us to pray. So I want to just kind of talk about two things today as we put our eyes in the wider context of a greater thy. First, Jesus teaches us to pray for our daily bread. Now, that word daily kind of doesn't mean daily. It is a made-up Greek word as they tried to get at the idea of what Jesus was probably saying in Aramaic. The Greek word there is epiousios, which we all know. We all know what that means, right? It means around essential things. So whatever it is that kind of gets to what is essential. So another way of saying it is, prayer isn't just about asking God for what we want to happen in every sense, or trying to use prayer in some way to get God to really kind of like put it in spiritual terms, but like get to like what my agenda is in life. Maybe you heard the joke about the man who asks God, what is 1,000,000 years to you? And God said in response, a mere second. And The man said, then what is $1 million to you? And God said, a mere penny. And so the man said, well, give me a penny. And God said, in a second. We can use prayer that way to try to work an angle on God. It's not that. Prayer isn't just a clever way to get God to do what we want. It is a reorienting our lives to what is essential. So maybe the most obvious question is, well, what is essential? Thank you for asking, because I think it's a worthy question for us. What is essential? What's most important? And most of us will spend much of our lives trying to figure out the answer to that question, I think. You know, we always try to think, I want to kind of get to this, we always try to think, what's the step that you need to take out of the sermon, right? And sometimes there needs to be a clear action step. Sometimes we need to go and do. I think I want to make clear our action step out of this series, the whole series, is to do the exact same thing, which is to actually pray the Lord's Prayer. And to get to the core of things, which in this case means to really pray about what is essential for us. I want you to go home and pray and ask that question in prayer. What is it that is essential? What is it that I want? What is it that I need? And to sit with that as the worship has helped us do today, to just kind of create a space where we listen. What are our essentials? Of course, physical needs, food, water, shelter. We need those things. Fundamentally, we need deep connection with each other. I don't know why I've done this. I watched the kids today twice. This happened first at 8:15. I was not expecting what happened, my response to it. I mean, the kids are wonderful. They're raising their hands and praising God. But then when they do that part where they put their hands on each other, and then we did the same, and I watched couples at 8:15, like, they kind of looked at each other like, okay, you know, and like, I'm not talking about strangers. I'm talking about married couples. Like, okay, we can touch each other, you know, like we love, okay. Do we love each other? Yeah, okay. That just basic human connection is so fundamental. That's what got me. That's what got me both times. Probably will the third time. What is essential? What is it that we most need? A sense of love and value and meaning and purpose. And where are we going to find that? And not with the frills and not with sort of the hoopla, but down to what is essential. Asking God for what is essential is certainly not the prosperity gospel's name it and claim it approach to life. It is certainly not the Christian nationalism, American exceptionalism, consumeristic version of just take what we want, using God as an excuse for our greed or our pride. Praying for our daily bread is a call to simplicity, is a call to less is more, and to figure out how to live that way. A call to trust God and to live in peace with Him as we learn to rely on God through the little things, through daily things. It's what's essential. Isn't it true that that's probably how we learn actual trust? Not in the big ways, but in what we would consider small ones. Daily bread ties back to the story of the Israelites in the wilderness, who had to learn that daily trust around what was essential as they were on the journey to freedom. Their most essential need was food. God provided manna in the wilderness. Manna literally means, what is it? So, you know, can you imagine that? It's like God is providing. It's a daily thing. You go out and they're like, what is it? Have you ever had the food like put in front of you and you're like, oh, what is it? Right? It's never a good sign. You're like, mystery meat. It's not, what is it? You can imagine the conversation like, you eat it. No, you eat it first. You eat it. Like, you try it. What is it? God provided the manna from heaven, and they had to learn that they had to collect it every day. You may remember it was daily bread. When I was in Sedona, I told stories and showed a lot of pictures. I'm going to show you one picture this week. We were looking out at the bird feeder from our house. I took that picture from inside the house of a Gambel's quail. Anybody ever seen one of those? I grew up on farm. I grew up with quail coveys of quail on a farm, and I just love them. What does it say about me that one of the highlights on my trip was a bird? Right? There's a certain age you get, by the way, right? You know, like most of our lives, somebody said, a comedian I think said, most of our lives we're like, oh, those are birds. And then at some point you wake up and you're like, that's a Gambel's quail. Its habitat is in the southwestern part of the United States. And you start so getting excited about it. I got excited about the quail, but it was part of a wider thing that was happening. I may have shared last week. As I went on that trip, it was a grief trip. It was trying to create a space for God to speak and get down to what is essential. And It was like you've been on vacations where nothing can go right. This was the opposite. Like everything just kept falling into place. And finally I said, we've got to name that. It's God's provision. And so then the quail shows up and I got excited and my buddy goes, hey, maybe we should go outside and look for some manna as well, because it seems like that's the appropriate response. Gamble's quail, by the way. It's not the California quail. Though their habitat and their range overlaps, just in case you wanted to know. What would it be like in all the little ways to just notice God's provision? Wouldn't that be a better way to live? It's probably not in the big things, but in the little things that we learn to trust God. And the opposite is probably also true, that unless we learn to trust God in the little things, we probably aren't going to rise to the occasion and meet the crisis moments of our lives and say, oh yeah, God will provide. Probably not going to just make that leap if we don't cultivate a sense of appreciation and recognition for the daily bread. It is in that question of will God provide that we find maybe a deepening of our spiritual life. It's a deeper thing than we think. Do we trust God to provide what is essential? Do we really trust that? It's the question of the Israelites in the wilderness. It's the question kind of driving the feeding of the 5,000. And it seems so simple. We need to get lunch for everybody, and the disciples go to Jesus. And two just really beautiful things in that. One, it says, Jesus asked a question to test them. Now, to test, we're going to talk about test actually next week. That word test or temptation, it's kind of all one word in Greek. It can have sort of a negative side or a positive side, and this puts it on the positive side. It's a teachable moment. Jesus, in other words, says, I'm going to take just getting lunch for everybody and make it into a teachable moment about how God provides, or whether we trust God to provide. And of course, the disciples were going to struggle with that. We also hear in that John says sort of the clue that Jesus already knew what he was going to do. He asked the question, but he already knew what he was going to do. Maybe you do that sometimes too. You ask a question, but you already have in mind what's going to happen. Jesus already knew, because it was about something bigger than just getting people lunch. It was like in the wilderness with the Israelites, that trusting in a daily way was about a grander narrative of salvation and freedom and liberation. The little thing, the what is it in the desert, was about a bigger thing that God was wanting to do. So it is with Jesus. And right out the gate, the disciples miss it, right? They say what we always say, which is, there's not enough. It is our go-to lie. There's not enough. And we all do it. It is so human in us to look at the situation, to look at our world, and we can't imagine a world, in fact, where there is enough. They say, there's not enough. And Jesus pushes them. They find a little boy's lunch as a very humble starting place. And a miracle happens. Everybody eats. Makes me think of the little angel's attic sale. What a miracle, really. And in the discussion of the feeding of the 5,000 miracle, there's a question, is it that somehow supernaturally bread just kind of came out of nowhere like it did in the desert? Or was it a miracle of generosity in that, as they actually looked around and as a little boy's lunch started it, there actually was enough to pull in, and it was a miracle of generosity among the people. At the end of the day, I think the little angel's attic sale is a bit of both to me. This sale this week, we sold $84,687 in proceeds, which is an increasing amount coming out of our COVID era. 70% of that goes back to the sellers, and 30% goes to community organizations serving women and children and families. So that means close to $25,000 going out to serve. It's a beautiful thing. It's a miracle of generosity, as all of that happens as people give their time and their resources and come together, and we find out there's a lot more going on than we realized. And it's a lot of work. So let's thank those who are part of that. And if you ask any of them, because we talk, I mean, it's the same for all of us. That it's a kind of a constant question, like, how's this going to work? We got to trust God every single time. Are the volunteers going to show up? Are the things going to show up? Are people going to be helped? It's a lesson in trust and generosity. And so even if if that's just it's just that, it's a miracle, because we can't imagine a world where we come together, do simple things, and miracles of generosity happened. Jesus already had in mind what God already had in mind, because a lot of our most basic and most favorite scriptures are about that question. Is there enough? I want to roll through those quickly this morning. You might just take note of the references and go back and meditate on these as you pray. Psalm 23 begins, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not," what's the word? It's a stake in the ground against the lie of scarcity. Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, when he says, "Therefore don't be anxious around these very things. What shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the Gentiles seek after those things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all." Or in the next chapter of in Matthew's Gospel, in the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew 7:7, we read, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a rock?" See how it makes the shift toward God's perspective and God's abundance. Or if your child asks for a fish, you give them a serpent. If then you who are evil know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your heavenly Father who is in heaven, your Father who is in heaven, give good things to those who ask him? Learning to trust God for daily bread is why money and stuff is so intricately tied to our spirituality. The spiritual life involves giving up our self-promotion and our self-protection and our greed. This is the advice of Hebrews. "Keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have. For he has said, I will never leave you or forsake you." And then listen to the attitude shift that comes out of that in Hebrews. "So we can confidently say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me?" You see the switch? It's like when you learn to trust God in little things, and you walk with confidence into your life saying, you know what? I bet I can trust God here too. We hear the same switch in one of our favorite scriptures in Romans 8, which says, "What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son," so this is not a scarcity thing up to the very core of who God is, "but who gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things?" We could go on. In James 1, we read, "Every good and perfect gift comes from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change." In a world that seems like it is in constant chaos, could it be that praying for our daily bread as our action step, could it be that living in a world of constant change, that is our resistance to the lie of scarcity? I like Wendell Berry's kind of take on this. He says, behind a lot of our isms is just simple greed. Racism, sexism, consumerism. It's just people trying to scrap for something or use power in a way based in a lie that there's not enough to go around. Which leads us to the second part I want to get to as we come to communion. Equally surprising in its simplicity. I said, and maybe some of you caught this, I said in the Lord's Prayer, it's thy before I. But somebody was sitting there going, but wait, Pastor Adam, it doesn't say I, does it? It says, give us this day our daily bread. It may be the most radical part of those words to say, when we pray, give us this day our daily bread, that we're also making a shift, not only from thy to I, but from me to we. To live all of life with an orientation that there's enough to go around for everybody. And almost immediately you're going to say, but is there? When we live in a world where about 1 billion people live in extreme poverty. And if you span out and kind of just go to what we consider moderate poverty, which is $2,500 a year, a little less than $7 a day. I think the math works out. That's half the world almost. We literally cannot imagine a world in which everyone has the essentials for life. Everyone, everywhere has their daily bread. We can't imagine that, which is why we need to pray the prayer. It's the very reason we need to come down to what is essential, as we are called to be those who long for and then act out a faith that there is actually enough for everybody. And that it is not an issue of God's provision, but a lack of our vision to see a world in which that could be. The lie that there isn't enough is grounded not in God's provision, as we see in the story of Jesus, who lived this prayer out, and brings us to communion today as we come to remember that Jesus, after he had fed the 5,000, was followed around by the crowds because they wanted more miracles and more bread, as we do. But Jesus uses that moment to expand their vision, and I think perhaps to expand ours. Jesus said to them, "Truly I tell you, it was not Moses who gave you the bread in the wilderness, but it was God's provision. For the bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." And John's always using kind of double language there. It's not just the what is it that comes down from heaven, it's the who is it, Jesus, who's come down from heaven. And so they say, "Sir, always give us this bread." And Jesus declared, "I am that bread." In Jesus, we see the full extent of God's generosity and abundance and graciousness and expansiveness. We can't come to the communion and table and believe the lie that there isn't enough, because we have the example and we follow it as we live into the vastness of God's grace. Jesus, who lived thy before I, and he also lived we before me. This is the prayer that Jesus lived, and so we are invited to as well.